Now, welcome to Biztech's Enterprise Technology Show, the show where we feature tech companies operating across Asia, talking about their businesses and how they make a difference to their customers. Now, today our conversation is with Dan Ternes, Chief Technology Officer Asia Pacific at Blue Prism. Now, Blue Prism is a global leader in enterprise robotic process automation and intelligent automation. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Nice to be here.
Now, Dan, for a start, give us an overview of Blue Prism and its history.
Sure. Well, Blue Prism started the RPA market for all intents and purposes. Like a lot of tech companies, we were a 20-year overnight success. So this year is actually Blue Prism's 20th anniversary. And I think most people will be surprised to think that RPA has even been around for that long, because it's really been in the last couple of years that things have really taken off. But we have been around that long, and we've created the RPA market. We had two founders that saw, really just through a lot of their consulting work, they saw that organizations were really struggling with how to automate simple business processes, things that, cost money, cause problems, cause delays, create errors. And there's got to be a better way than simply saying, well, we need IT to go and spend 6 months reinventing something. They said, how can we use what we already have? How can we use the applications that we already have, that we know how they work? And how can we simply just sort of, in a sense, emulate the same way that humans do those things? So that was the light bulb moment, if you like. And that's they went down that path, and they created Blue Prism. And from that spawned what an incredible, successful industry that, across the board is living in, huge value for organizations. And it's really been, say, that overnight success story.
Okay, so walk us through that 20 years now, but then bring us to today. What are your products and services that you offer in the region that really help customers?
Sure. Well, the core of what we offer is RPA, robotic process automation. That term has started to be referred to more as intelligent automation, as the capabilities have expanded. I'll explain a little bit about that. But at its heart is still the idea that says, I've got humans who interact with my core applications in my business. They read an email, they get an Excel spreadsheet that was attached to the email, they open the Excel spreadsheet, every one of those line items represents a transaction. They've got to take that data, they've got to update it to Salesforce or their mainframe or SAP or some other homegrown or legacy or existing application. And so much of what humans do in the organization is exactly that. And so the premise of RPA is that rather than have humans do that pretty mundane, pretty laborious and not really value add task, why don't we get this software service to do it? Why don't we get the software service to do exactly the same thing as that? And so, with RPA, we teach that robot what the interfaces look like, what the applications look like, what that button there does and that menu item there does. And we train it to copy exactly what the human does. That's the essence of RPA. Now, as I said, it's kind of morphed into a term now. It's much more about intelligent automation. And the premise behind that is it says, well, actually, when we started with RPA, our robots were kind of dumb, They were doing all the laborious things that humans do and leave the humans to do value-added stuff and the more sophisticated tasks, great. But I'd really like my robots to be a bit smarter as well. I'd like my robots to be able to read documents, right? And extract data out of documents, which they didn't used to be able to do. I'd like my robots to be able to actually collaborate with humans, the human workers. So it's not just a either or proposition, it's an and proposition. Robots do some of the tasks and humans do other tasks, but how do they collaborate? I want my robots to take more sophisticated decisions. So these are all kind of characteristics or skills that we wanted the robots to be able to complete. And that has meant we've sort of grown up the software platform to cover more of those capabilities. So today within Blue Prism, the core is RPA, but we've got a lot of document processing integrated in there as an add-on. We've got a lot of the human workflow integrated in there as an add-on, complex decision making as an add-on, and all of this sort of represent the skills that my robots can do to apply to business processes and business problems, and sort of take that work away from humans and allow them to do, let's say, the more valuable things that humans are better suited to.
And that obviously brings a lot of efficiencies and savings, right, for an organization. And you would think that, and the white papers have often showed us, these are often manifested in early adopters in the financial services industries. Could you walk us through some of your clients that you've helped and some of the savings and efficiencies that they've been able to achieve?
Sure. You're absolutely right. Financial services, the number one adopter of this technology, as they are of many technologies, but certainly with an RPA, financial services is the number one adopter. And certainly Blue Prism's biggest market has been financial services as well. Our first customer was a financial services organization. We built a lot of the technology around the requirements, particularly regulatory requirements and compliance requirements of financial services. We've been very successful in that industry. So to give you some examples, we have many of the banks around the region, throughout Singapore, throughout Hong Kong, throughout Australia, New Zealand, across the board, they're using Blue Prism for a lot of basically back office processing of the core processes of banking, so loans origination or customer onboarding, a lot of the, complaints management or hardship applications being processed through Blue Prism. A lot of things like, institutional term deposits. So not so much your HR, not your finance, invoice processing and what have you, but the things that are core to the business of banking. I'll give you an example, and I love this example. One of our customers is a bank in Thailand, and they have a problem, as many banks do, that customers will go to the ATM, they'll try to withdraw money from the ATM, and they don't get the money out of the ATM. That there's an error there. And so you've got a customer that that's the angriest I'll ever be in my banking relationship, right? Is when the money doesn't come out of the ATM. And how do you handle that scenario? Now, this bank, as I think a lot of banks do, they rely upon the customer to call the call center, and they have to alert the bank to the problem. And the bank then investigates, and eventually you'll get your money back, but 7 days. And so this is a real problem, but that's the process of dealing with these situations. So the bank decided, well, we've got, for all intents and purposes, an infinite workforce. I've got digital workers, they represent an infinite workforce to me. What can I do with an infinite workforce? And so they get the digital workers to monitor ATM withdrawal transactions and to proactively identify if there's been an error, if there's been this sort of no cash out scenario. And so it stops being a reactive, wait for the customer to call me and then try to fix it. And it's become a proactive, I'll monitor the transactions, I'll identify the errors, I'll send a text message immediately to the customer to say, we noticed the problem, and I'll get you your money back in 10 minutes. Massive change in the whole sort of context. So, that's kind of a style of problem that a lot of organizations are looking to solve, is that sort of customer experience style problems. On the other side of the fence, you've got a lot of the back office stuff, the transaction processing of loans or onboarding, origination, etc., that require me to update systems and the like. So we do the same sort of thing. Now, to put some numbers around it, to give you some ideas. One of our customers in Australia, one of the top 4 banks down in Australia, they did a very detailed cost benefit analysis of what were they actually getting from Blue Prism, and what is the comparison between my digital worker and my offshore human resource. And they looked at sort of the scale that they are operating at it, which was in kind of the hundreds of digital workers, not massive. They were finding that for every $1 that they spent on Blue Prism, they were getting back $5.57 in return on investment. It's an incredible, 600% gains. It's an incredible payback. They found that the cost of the digital worker, when taking into account all of my OPEX, CAPEX, run costs, build costs, was 60% less than the cost of an offshore resource. So it really does, there's a massive cost benefit there. There's a massive benefit of freeing up humans to do the things that humans are better at. And so cost is a big aspect to it. But it's not only cost. The example of the Thai bank is very much an example of customer experience. There's also examples of revenue generation as well. So at the end of the day, it rolls up into some really massive savings for financial services organizations.
Okay, Dan, but then there are also the flip side of the equation. There are concerns and apprehensions around this adoption. How can they be addressed, including the cost, cybersecurity, and of course, scalability?
Yeah, change. Change is always scary. Change always creates concerns naturally. And look, don't get me wrong, there are concerns that have to be broached and solved with RPA. I think that you can do this thing well, you can do this thing poorly, and same software, how you approach it is going to determine how much value you get from it. So you have to do things right, and certainly concerns about, we did a survey recently, actually. Maybe this is a good way to describe it. We did a survey recently specific to financial services and specific to the Asia Pacific region. So very, appropriate to your audience and the people we're talking to now. And they asked, one of the questions we asked, it was an independent survey. We didn't ask the questions. We commissioned it through a third party. So it's independent. But one of the questions that was asked was about concerns. And so I'll tell you, 62% of people said we have a concern about security and data privacy. It goes back to your point. 43% of people said concerns about cost and budget. So again, goes back to your point. Other two high concerns were 59% of people concerned about how do I find the right processes for automation, for RPA, and another set, 53% said how do I find the right talent for it. So absolutely, there's concerns. Let me sort of address some of it. I don't want to say it's unfounded, but they can be easily minimized. So I look at security and data privacy. Actually, RPA done right is greater security and greater data privacy than less. In fact, one of the reasons that we saw a great spike throughout the course of COVID was the issues with home working and the implications for banks about data privacy, data security when people are working from home. If I've got digital workers in the office, that goes away. So security actually is a lot of the reasons why people adopt RPA, because I can have a more secure environment. Now, I get that you need to sort of have done it to realize that, but actually it's a benefit rather than a risk if you do it right. Cost, I get that people are concerned about cost, but I think that if cost is the issue, or if you're implementing RPA and you feel that you're not getting the ROI, that the costs are actually exceeding or overwhelming the benefits, I think you're probably looking at the wrong sort of processes. You're automating the wrong sort of things. And RPA is very much an umbrella term. It refers to a lot of different things, and we use the same term, but it doesn't necessarily all mean the same thing. I see a lot of organizations, they'll be putting these sort of software robots on every user's desk and saying to their people, go and automate. Here's a tool for you. Go and build something that's going to make your life better. It's very hard. Now, it sounds like a great idea, but it's very hard to turn that into real value to the organization, okay? Because you're automating slivers of time. You're not automating processes that are core to what you're trying to deliver as an organization. So if cost is becoming an issue for you, I think you need to look at what sort of processes you are automating.
Dan, and I want to ask you a question then. I'm going to interrupt you at this point of time. Yeah. I'm a CIO of a legacy bank in a less developed market. So really fertile ground for somebody like Blue Prism to come in, because most of my processes are automated. Yep. Give me a toolkit in terms of the top 5 things or 3 to 5 things that I need to look at that I could get quick wins and achieve significant savings and efficiencies.
Okay. I would absolutely be looking at sort of onboarding, origination type activities, because they're very document centric and they're very much customer experience is key, and they're very manual. Okay. So this is a sweet spot area that I think that organizations can absolutely get benefit from. And if I can give you, the counterpoint, there was a very interesting article in the Australian press a couple of months ago about one of the big four banks there that said, and people have been fired over it, basically, or seems like it, because they failed to anticipate the mortgage boom in Australia. And they failed to be able to satisfy demand quickly enough. Their processes were too manual, and they're quoted in the press saying our processes were too manual compared to the opposition. So they lost market share. So this is an area where you've got the competition automated, actually using tools like Blue Prism, and then we're manual. Has a big impact there. So yeah, origination stuff, very, very key there. I think there's a lot of benefits that you can get from the front office, and looking at customer experience and saying, how can I offer services to my customers that start to be 24/7 and start to be, creating a digital front door to processes and applications that are perhaps not digital and are difficult to make digital. How do I turn them into a digital transaction for customers? I think that's another area that's absolutely key for organizations. So there's two areas that I think that you'd look at almost immediately if I was a bank or a financial services organization.
The other thing I see is also that RPA makes compliance easier and perhaps also helps FSIs then navigate ever increasing and stricter compliance.
Absolutely. 100% agree. I think there's two parts to it. There's the part that says, look, if I'm doing something via this digital robot, my digital worker, it's following a process, and it follows that process faithfully 100% of the times. It never deviates from the process. It never deviates from the rules. It's very, very deterministic. And I can always trace and audit exactly what that Blue Prism robot can do. And so to a compliance department, that's wonderful, because look, I can guarantee how we process something from start to finish, and I can see how we started the process. So from that perspective, compliance, fantastic. But then there's also in effect the business of compliance. The business of compliance has gotten more and more and more difficult. You've got increased regulatory oversight, there's increased regulatory enforcement. Organizations are having to be much more defensive about their risk and compliance. I think about things like suspicious transaction reports. You look at the growth in the volume of suspicious transaction reports over the last couple of years. In Australia, I looked up the statistics recently. In Australia, 256% increase between 2016-17 and 2019-20 in suspicious transaction reports. In the US, it's up 50% over the past 6 years. In the UK, increased 20% between 2019-2020. This is just, a small example of a wider problem for compliance departments, and they have to be more defensive. That the fines are greater, the implications are greater, etc. So how do I offer that compliance? How do I make sure that I review everything? Review every transaction, given that sort of fine grained and very precise analysis and interpretation of everything that happens within the bank. That is a difficult and cost prohibitive thing. And digital workers are doing some of the heavy lifting for that. So an example, one of our customers, massive global bank, AML situation, they're looking at sanction screening and the like for international payments. They're doing 1 million international payments a day, and they've got an AML system that's spitting out alerts for suspicious transactions that need further review and further analysis. 80,000 a day. 80,000 a day that have to be reviewed by humans. It's massive, of course. Global bank, 1 million transactions. Of course, many of those hits, many of those alerts are false positives, okay? But they've got to be conservative because, you don't want them to slip through the gaps. So now I've got a lot of false positives. I've got a huge volume. Many of those are false positives, and humans have to review it all. Humans have to sift through the work. What they've done, very intelligent, is they've inserted digital workers in. It's sort of a triage process. So I've got my AML with my AI sort of technology, machine learning. That feeds into a series of alerts that feed into digital workers, do another level of investigation analysis, which narrows down the false positives into just positives that get handed off to humans to deal with it. And so again, it's that simplification of a compliance process that allows me to not just look for the high risk categories, but I'm going to look at 100% of transactions because I've got that infinite workforce. And I'm going to leave my humans to do deep analytical work, deep investigative work, the things that require human judgment. And it becomes this lovely triage between AI and machine learning through digital workers, through human workers. Great solution for compliance. And you see that all throughout financial services organizations.
Now, Blue Prism is in an exciting phase of its journey. It's just been acquired. What's next for Blue Prism in the Asia Pacific region in 2022?
Certainly growth, obviously, like any software company. But I think that for Blue Prism, as it is for many RPA vendors, we've seen organizations here locally that have adopted RPA to a pretty extensive extent. And they're doing many different things with it and saving hundreds of thousands of hours with it. A lot of it is what my colleague Jared calls dumb automation, the simple stuff, right? The very transactional stuff, the very laborious stuff. There's certainly an opportunity for these organizations to now start moving up the food chain and doing some of the processes that are more complex and more sophisticated. And also not just looking at processes, but looking at problems. What are the core problems that my organization has and how do I fix those? That's a much more sophisticated story. And those are the sort of things that I think we focus on the next couple of years.
And I think, Dan, just taking up your point on that, really then what you're saying is, if you allow me to distill that, leadership taking and sponsoring this at a strategic level, looking at this instead of just a tactical departmental level.
That is, you're so correct. You're so correct. One of the things that is going to determine your success, or maybe not failure, but massive success or sort of ordinary other project, is going to be how you adopt it. It's technology. The software is one thing, of course, but how you approach it is absolutely key. And executive sponsorship is key to that. And seeing it and treating it as a strategic program of work, a strategic initiative, rather than, as I say, a series of tactical solutions. I can build lots of tactical solutions and I'll get lots of benefits from those tactical solutions. I'll probably reach a wall pretty quickly. I'll probably struggle to get over that wall pretty quickly because the how I've approached it means it's not necessarily an optimal implementation. I think of it like juggling. I start to have to juggle, keep all the balls in the air and not drop anything. And it becomes harder and harder if I haven't approached things the right way. So executive sponsorship is key. And at the end of the day, it is change. And as I said before, any change is a bit scary for organizations. And particularly when talking about this, there's cultural changes, there's organizational changes, there's bureaucratic changes that need to be addressed, and having that individual or series of individuals that have both the power, the opportunity to make those changes and to cross organizational boundaries is really important for it, and basically give people the permission to have a go, to try, and to solve some of these intractable problems that we've been faced with for a long time. It's absolutely critical.
Dan, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot. Thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thanks very much, Brian. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to Dan Ternes, Chief Technology Officer APAC at Blue Prism, on Biztech's Enterprise Technology Show. This video and podcast will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our social media platforms. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thank you very much for tuning in.